Great, good afternoon. Thanks for coming. My name is Sonia Carlson, and I'm a program manager with the Azure Data Factory service. And Azure Data Factory is a new service that composes data storage, movement, and transformation and monitoring services on Azure. And as most of you know, our Hadoop implementation is HD Insight on Azure. My original co-speaker, Tyrone Palmer, is a developer with a game studio based out of London. Unfortunately, Tyrone could not make it today, so it is going to be just me, just Microsoft, for the whole 40 minutes. So let me just pause and feel the love in the room for that. Great. Okay, so what we'll be talking about today is how a gaming studio, now known as Tyrone's gaming studio in London, that's what we'll call it today. How did they find a way to kind of reliably set up data production pipelines that they needed to enable both hot and cold path analyses? And we'll talk about what that is. I'm sure most of you have heard the term, but some of you may have not. To enable both those hot and cold path analyses and get gamer profiling data and metrics that were important for driving their business forward. And their business really is to sell more game titles. They had a couple of business models on the side, but primarily that's what they were. That's what their primary motive was to sell more game titles. So why would you do this? Well, my boss came to me one day and said, "Sonia, how can we take absolutely all of the fun out of gaming? How can we turn it into a set of metrics and numbers that a gaming studio can use to upsell and understand usage patterns and develop new features?" Well, there's a way to do that, but there's some challenges associated with that. Okay, enough of looking at these two guys that are acting like they're gaming. Get this clicker going. Okay, so the challenges are somewhat obvious. Many of them you've heard in other talks today when you're talking about data integration. We've got the different volumes, different velocities across multiple sources, how and when to use predictive analytics, and how to plug all of those things together in a very seamless and reliable way. In addition, with the game studio, they also had to think about other things that they had to provide, other services like the front-end data collection, the hardware load balancing, being able to provide anonymous and identifiable logins, doing cross-platform cloud save, and also doing some A and B testing for their features. So they had kind of those implementation logistics that they had to deal with, in addition to developing cool games. But also, the real challenge came when, once they get their hands on this data, what do they do with it? So they have to be able to understand the patterns, and that's patterns in their business as well as patterns in their users. They unfortunately did not have a dedicated BI analyst team or a set of data scientists. They needed very quick turnaround, because in this gaming world, things change very, very fast, and the development cycles they have to turn around very quickly. And also, it has to be cost-effective. That's kind of an obvious one. All right. So what were some of the top-line metrics that they were looking at, and how did they get there? So because they were kind of a new studio, one of their primary motivators was both on the engagement and the financial side. So about 70% of their effort needed to go into understanding their engagement and financial. So they looked at things like, how do we measure daily active users, monthly active users? What do we look at for retention? How do we think about revenue? Is it average revenue per user, average revenue per paid user, average revenue per user per daily average user, per this, per that, per revenue, for daily, all of them. There's several metrics that you can choose from. And additionally, how do you track against what you forecast? So this is kind of hard, especially if you don't have a lot of historical data to deal with. You're pushing out new games, you don't really know what's going to happen. So there's a lot of opportunity there to do some predictive analytics. Additionally, the other top-line metric they wanted to get to was to understand what their conversion funnels and their drop-off rates looked like. So as they were getting new users in the door, how many of them would stop because of some problem, whether it was a login issue or something that caused them to not continue and graduate down to becoming a very attached user. So wanting to understand where are the stop points in their customer profile. And thirdly, they wanted to be able to provide the right kind of analyst and data science support. So they needed to access very granular activities at the player level and also at a high level of time granularity, because it's very important in this world to respond quickly. So in order to do that, what they were doing before, the analysts were taking about approximately 80% of their time was just spent on data integration and data wrangling and data cleansing. It's kind of the mantra that you'll hear all throughout this conference. So these were kind of the top-line metrics that they wanted to improve. Right? They wanted to understand their engagement in financials, understand their conversion funnels, and understand how to break the bottlenecks for their analysts and data scientists. All right, so how do we get there? This is a common problem in London, apparently. And just as an aside, when I got to my hotel room last night, I had this giant, modern, trough-sized sink like this with one faucet here and one faucet all the way over there. So this wouldn't actually work for that. I did actually find an edge case for this to bring together hot and cold path analyses. So yeah, you can do this. You can sort of jigger up a soda bottle to kind of pull these streams together, but what you'd really like to do is do it in a very reliable way, something that's not brittle, something that won't degrade over time or burst or any number of things I could imagine going wrong here. Okay, so how do we get there? How do we merge those? How do we merge hot path, near real-time aspects with batch processing and reference data analytics? And how do we include predictive analytics? So what we did, we sat down to kind of sketch out what's our problem and what's our solution. This is obviously not Tyrone and I, but some guys that are sketching out a design. So we looked at, first of all, what do we have? What kind of data do we have at hand? We know that we have things like demographics that users may or may not provide, age, education, occupation, those kinds of things. We have a lot of the commerce data, billing, loyalty points, in-app purchases for each user. Some of their social networking aspect. Are their friends playing the same games? Do they want to play the same games as their friends? What are the leaderboards and how do you maintain those? How do you do matchmaking? And how do you detect cheaters? Additionally, we had kind of the usage data, which is average session length, play session times, daily average users, those kinds of activities. And then also user satisfaction and just the operation and use of the service itself. What's your time to recovery? What's your failure rate? Number of complaints, number of tickets that you have open, those kinds of things. And so we had all these sort of buckets, and we have to determine, well, what's important for gamer profiling, what's important for service profiling, and how do we put it together? So at each step of the way, you kind of have to ask from a business point of view, what metrics matter, at what stop points do they matter? From a customer experience point of view, what stop points matter? If you're playing a game or doing something, it's really, really annoying when that survey pops up and says, how are we doing? Right? So we have to understand, yes, we need that data, but do you need it right now? When do you need it? When does it make sense in all of the different flows? And additionally, At what point can we stop and ask ourselves, where do predictive analytics make sense? Some things lend themselves well to predictive analytics, and some things you simply will never have the features to work with. So sketching out a solution had to involve all of those aspects to be able to put together something that would merge these two paths. Okay, so when we sat down and started sketching this out, we kind of look at what these flows, and this is a little bit what it boiled down to, this kind of a cartoon thing with lots of work underneath of it. But essentially, you've got your multiple devices that are coming in, and so each of those devices would require some sort of gateway client front end, gateway client back end, hardware load balancing. Is data coming in as a stream? Is it coming in as a batch? So all that sort of falls in the collect bucket. And then we say, well, we have to put that data somewhere to kind of start to work with it. So how do we get that all in an environment that we can operate over? How do we transform it? What kinds of transformations do we want to apply? How do I join it with some of my on-prem reference data? So that all had to be masked out, anonymized. And then I can optionally apply some machine learning and predictive analytics to that, dump it out to a SQL database, which can then be visualized in a number of ways. So that's kind of the rough sketch, and if we could take a PowerPoint and convert it into code, that would be just super easy and be very happy, but it doesn't quite work that way. All right. So this is just kind of a simple example of what some of this data looked like. So we had kind of this semi-structure-ish log file data. We had some of the on-prem user data. And we wanted to bring it together in a nice tabular way that the data scientists and BI analysts could quickly consume and look at through the tools that they're used to using. So that's just kind of a quick example of what that looks like. So at this point, I would turn this over to Tyrone. And Tyrone would say to me, well, what did we try to do to get this to work? So in a terrible British accent, Tyrone would say, roll your own. But his pro tip was, don't roll your own. It turned out to be kind of a nightmare as he tried to build out scale. So then what do we do? So what we did was we said, well, let's choose a set of technologies that would reliably allow Tyrone to fulfill that sketch that we had and answer all those questions that we had from multiple point of view. So what we put together, here we have some of the analytics services that are part of Azure. So HD Insight, as I mentioned, is our Hadoop implementation, our Azure Machine Learning, Azure Stream Analytics, Azure Data Factory, and Event Hubs. On the right-hand side, we have some of the visualization tools, Power BI, Power Pivot, Power Query, to kind of do the quick slice and dice analyses. So that's what we opted to go with to put that together. Tyrone says, great, now we have a data lake. 2 data lakes, 8 data lakes. And our analysts still need a simple way to access everything. They can't give out production storage account keys to each of their analysts, devs, and data scientists. So with the Azure services plus Hadoop, we needed to pull this together in a way that made it simple for their end goal. All right, so let's take a quick look at just a conceptual view of what the hot path analysis would look like. So you have incoming event data from a device. You can set up a event hub service bus to collect it and use Stream Analytics to do the near real-time processing or querying on that. And after this, I will jump out and kind of give you a live view of what that looks like for those of you that are not familiar with it. That goes into, can dump that into storage, add the on-prem reference data, and then compose your analytics over all of that. So you can orchestrate your Hive processing, your pig processing, and basically any custom .NET code that you want to add in there. Additionally, you can develop machine learning models, plug those into your flow, and have these all orchestrated and managed as a set of data production pipelines. And ultimately, you produce that data out for consumption by BI tools or web apps or any other type of consumption that you'd like to do there. Okay. So on the streaming side, we start to bring a little bit of the fun back, and we talk about, well, this is a great case for anti-cheat. This has to happen in the moment. You have to detect somebody who is maybe differing from their previous level or has used some other cheat code, and it's happening in real time. So there's examples where you'd want to use that there. If you're looking at more of the historical or batch metrics, maybe you're looking at last month's reporting, something in the past. This is where you'd look at the user and customer profile data, put that together. And then if you want to be forward-looking and use predictive analytics to decide who might buy what feature, how much might they pay for it, that's where you would plug in some of the machine learning and kind of have that orchestrated with the data factory service. So with this together, we have, let's see here, kind of the purples in here as the batch processing. You've got kind of the blues coming in as the hot path. You have the orchestration layer and the processing layer here, and consumption over here. And this was some of the outputs that were generated. So now this is all accessible by all of their analysts to pull whatever charts they like. So in this case, they went back to their engagement and financial metrics, and it's pretty basic to generate charts about those things, generate some pivot tables, do some slicing, and get a real idea of what your users are doing. All right, I wanted to take a second and go into a little more detail on incremental data production. This is on the cold path or the batch processing side. So in Tyrone's case, to do this cold path analysis, they essentially decided that they needed to partition their data by hour. And then they wanted to do their analytics on a very regular schedule. So what they did was partition their data by hour, and then every hour they'd run some activity, some processing activity, Hive transform, and each activity run would generate a set of data for that hour. And then what would happen is occasionally there'd be some error, whether it was a transient error or something else. And what they could do is go back and restate the broken data, and then that workflow would just simply kick off the next downstream piece to repair it and clean up the data. So this becomes really useful when you have error-prone data, like you often do with events coming in, or if you simply need to restate or backfill data over time. And there's lots of different scenarios where that thing would apply. So I just wanted to take a quick look at that. Okay, so what are some other examples of where this might work? I think Ranga showed a similar slide this morning of lots of other use cases where this might happen. So anywhere you're doing log analytics, product telemetry analysis, so the Ziosk restaurant example where you've got the device at the table, and you're either wanting to do hot path, where you're returning to the customer, looks like you bought this last time, maybe you want to buy this one this time, or you're doing back-end reporting. So lots of different things you can do on the telemetry side. The other thing would be things like purchase decision analyses, so market basket analysis. Why did somebody put something in their cart and then click away from it? How many times did they put it in their cart and not purchase? So those kinds of predictive analytics and models that can be applied there for customer usage. And another one would being automated risk processing. So how do you look at different features, assess risk, and provide recommendations? So that comes into play in industries like finance or insurance. Okay, so let's take a look at kind of what one of these dashboards might look like. Actually, I'm going to jump out of these live and take a look at what this okay. So what you're seeing here is the Microsoft Azure preview portal. And in here, let's take a look at all right. So we talked a little bit about kind of orchestrating and bringing together data and processes into these reliable workflows. So when you touch and feel the Azure Data Factory, this is what it looks like. This is your end-to-end flow of data inputs and activities that you're applying. And each of these you can do a drill in. So for example here, you might want to see what the actual source of that data pipeline looks like. How is it defined? You also might want to edit in here, and these are live edits. So in Tyrone's case, this is where we would bring together all the different data that was coming in, apply some Hive transforms. Now, in this case, there's actually a machine learning, a Mahout job that's applied here, and that's simply plug in this or any other jar as a custom activity to run those predictive analytics there. Or similarly, you can plug in a machine learning activity or any other custom .NET activity into one of these workflows. You also have kind of the initial monitoring, so this gives you the status of your data. So this is what it looks like to kind of touch and feel and monitor one of these workflows. You can also compose them. So for example here, I have my, I'll actually probably zoom that out. Better. So for example here, I have my definition of what this particular pipeline is doing. And in this case, this is a Hive script running on HD Insight. I can very quickly add activities to this particular pipeline. Let's say I needed to do a data copy. I can automatically insert the template in there. Yes, I'm kind of showing you a JSON editor, but it makes sense in the context of composing all of these different services together. Because at the end of the day, Tyrone doesn't care if he's pulling this service or that service. Is it a copy activity? What is it? I don't care. I want it all in one place where I can put my workflow together. So this is a templatized way to kind of add in different and new activities. Okay, so this is kind of the endpoint that you'd want to get to of having your workflows put together. And these apply to Tyrone's gaming case, where if you look at the output here, you're simply egressing it to Azure SQL table. You could egress it somewhere on-prem, whatever you'd like to do. Same with market basket analysis or customer churn predictions. Okay, so that's kind of the cold path side. If we look at what does the hot path analysis look and feel like, and let me zoom that a little bit. Okay, so this is Azure Stream Analytics. And so first thing I'll show you is Event Hub. And what I've done here is in this Event Hub, I've created an Event Hub to bring in two different streams of data, clicks and purchases. Okay, now I have composed my Stream Analytics jobs here. So now for my Stream Analytics job, I've brought in my data stream here that I've created called clicks, my data stream here that I've created called purchases, and also my reference data that I have, which is just, basically it's slowly changing data, my reference data of promotions and my product catalog. Now what I can do is I can simply query over those streams, over those collection of data, just using a SQL query-like language. Once that pops up, there it goes. So now that I've kind of garnered my stream data, both streams, my reference data, I can now begin to query and ask for things like customers that clicked at least once but did not purchase, or customers that clicked more than 10 times and purchased. So any number of queries that you'd want to run here using a simple query language. Okay. And I would encourage you all, we do have a booth. I encourage you all to go out there, and you can also see the machine learning workspace, which embarrassingly I don't have set up here. But it is out there running on the demo booth, and you can look at it, touch and feel it, and learn about it a little bit more. Last thing we'll look at is the Power BI. So we're back to this is a retail analysis sample. So this is going back to something much closer to Tyrone's metrics here, where you're looking at sales, you're looking at different averages. In this particular case, this store has also a physical presence, but that's not necessarily. So these are ways to kind of, now that Tyrone can reliably push his data out, you can hook these up to, in this case, Power BI, and create these dashboards and keep them refreshed and live. This is a case where we talked a little bit about predictive analytics, but one of the very popular analyses to apply is to think about customer churn. When you're looking at this gaming data, what are the, or any data, what are the signals that someone is about ready to, in this case, change mobile phone providers, or stop playing this game and move on to a different type of game. So this is one that's kind of high on the list of predictive analytics that people want to apply, mostly because we know, as we all know, the cost of retaining a customer is much lower than cost of customer acquisition. So being able to have a predictive analytics model that, like customer churn, allows you to kind of identify up front who's most likely to drop off. And then, depending on what your business actions are, you can decide what action do you need to take. Do you need to contact this person? Do you need to apply a promotional discount? And do you need to serve that up in real time as they're clicking through? So having this data and having it in a reliable way can kind of help you to make your decisions and ultimately meet your top-line metrics. Okay, so that's really all I have for you today. Finished a little bit early. Again, I would encourage you to check out the demo booth, learn a little bit more about Azure services. You can always email me, soniacar@microsoft.com, or visit us at azure.com. All right, thanks.